It'll be like that one time I posted in a random Reddit thread like 10 years ago and they found my name or something. I don't know.
Really? And they're able to put two and two together between like your channel and your name?
Yeah. It's
Wow.
happened on Facebook actually a couple times where someone will just like message me or add me and they're like, "Hey, I love your videos." I'm like, "How do you know who I am?" But whatever. Who knows?
It, in addition to doing the videos, do you also do you do the videos full time content creation, or do you do something else?
No, I actually work. So funny enough, my normal day job is I work for local government and I do videography and video editing for them too.
Oh,
So that's
wow.
my normal like full-time job, and then I do content creation
Mm.
on the side.
How long have you been working for like local government?
Oh gosh, a long time. I worked for my city back. I lived in Wisconsin. I'm from Wisconsin, Midwestern, eh?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I started out there and I worked for the city for like 8 years maybe, and then the last like 2 or 3 years I've been in North Carolina here. So working for a county.
Oh,
So I
that's
moved
very
up a
cool.
little bit.
Did you go to university? Did you get a degree in any sort of like digital computer science, anything like that?
Yeah, I just have an associate's degree in video motion graphics. Yep. I went to sort of a specialty school that no longer exists back in
Oh.
Wisconsin. But yeah, it was cool though. Learned a lot. Very hands-on.
Mhm.
Very much like let's get in and make stuff versus like let's sit down and study theory, you know.
Yeah.
I'm more of a hands-on person.
Did you ever have like an inkling to like work in that industry, be a video game developer or designer?
Yes, absolutely. I am not I obviously I don't have a degree in I have a degree in video, not like video game design or development, but I actually have an uncle that works out in Washington State with a college that's associated with Nintendo, and he teaches video game design. That's just a cool little connection. So I've always sort of had that like in the back of my brain. But I started sort of ambitiously through working with other people who have way more talent. I've sort of got the bare bones of understanding game development. Like I know everything that goes into it, developing your models, your sound design. You know, I've done a little bit of everything at this point. But I've reached out to people who are far more qualified than me to help me create my own 3D platformer. And so I've been working on that for a few years now, like maybe 2 years. Um, it's sort of like Banjo-Kazooie-esque, of course, with my own little twist on it. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm proud of it so far.
Oh,
There's a little bit of it on my channel, but just a little bit. I'm waiting to have like a full trailer done so I can like show it off. But yeah, it'll be cool.
I can't wait to see that. That's awesome. With that, Jordan, I'll give you a proper introduction here for everybody out there listening. Hi, my name is Chris. Welcome back to Chee-Tash, and today I am joined by Jordan from the YouTube channel Jiggylookback. Jordan, thanks again for doing this. I
Oh
really
yeah,
appreciate
thanks
it.
for having me.
In regards to your channel, like when somebody asks you, or if you tell somebody, yeah, I do content creation, I have a YouTube channel, and they ask you to describe it, how do you describe the content that you make?
Oh, isn't that a fantastic question? I probably would describe it as mostly sort of like lore deep diving and over analyzing video games, especially like the 90s, like N64 era of things. I touch a little bit of everything. I've done some more modern stuff. I've done some like GameCube, Dreamcast side of things, but I pretty much focus in and dial in on the N64 because that's really what I grew up playing. Like that's my main one.
In this time period, so you grew up playing as you were a kid. You had consoles like a N64, PS2, or are you even like a little bit older? You had like a SNES when it first came out.
So no, I'm not that old. I'm older than people think because most people are like, "Oh, I thought you were like 17." Be like, "No, I'm 31." So just for the record, I'm in my early 30s. I actually started with my friend, his older sister had a Sega Genesis. Like this is sort of where the journey began. and I would go over to his house, and that was my first experience really like playing video games. And we played Sonic the Hedgehog and Golden Axe. So those were the two games that I really was like, oh man, this is fantastic. And that sort of segued into like Earthworm Jim. And then I wanted a Sega Genesis for Christmas so bad. Like I was like begging for a Sega Genesis. And my parents went to the store, and this was like in the late 90s. Like my parents clearly had no idea about video games, and I had just played Genesis. I just assumed that's what was out there. That's what everyone had. And they got me a Nintendo 64, and that was in Christmas of 99. So that was the first console that was like, hey, this is mine. Like I didn't have to go to someone's house. But like branching off of that, I also had a few friends that had a Super Nintendo. I had some cousins that had a Super Nintendo. So I played Donkey Kong Country 2. I had some of those like really early like banger games, Super Mario World. I was exposed to those, but I didn't get to sit there and like own them and play through them at my leisure until I got a Nintendo 64, and the first game I got was Donkey Kong 64. And so that's why that game is sort of like it's not my main like if people ask me what my favorite N64 game, I'm never gonna say Donkey Kong 64. I always side with Banjo, but Rare is like certainly like the thing that I focused and locked in on. But Donkey Kong 64 has this special place in my heart as being like it's that game, that first game that I remember getting for Christmas back in the day, and it's just so special.
Have you always uh, played video games like throughout your life, or did you at some points in time as you were growing up, getting older, like take breaks and kind of go through periods where you weren't really playing that much?
Nope. I pretty much played video games my whole life. I can't think of one time where I wasn't at least playing something. Tastes have changed, like things have changed where there might be seasons where I'm like really into like for example when the 360 was huge and playing like Left 4 Dead and those style of like zombie shooters. I remember that being such a huge thing. Going to my friends and playing Black Ops and doing the zombie mode, like that was huge for me for a while. Um, Call of Duty just sort of fell off the face of the earth for me when they stopped. I don't I don't know. At some point it's just like, okay, this is just more of the same. Let's get something different. Yeah, one thing I was super hyper obsessed with Sonic the Hedgehog when I was little because that Sega Genesis connection, like I always had Sonic. And then I actually got the Windows like PC versions of it was like a 4 disc pack and it had Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic 2, Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 3, Sonic Racing, Sonic 3D Blast. So I played all of those like on my computer like in a totally different way than you would normally play them. And I always had that like Sonic, oh, I love Sonic, and I stuck through with Sonic like through the 2000s leading into like the biggest disappointment of my life, which was Sonic 06. Never have I been more hyped for a game, and never have I been more disappointed. I was like, so it goes beyond words because the demo that was on 360 that I played was good. And somewhere in between the demo and the release, they're like, "Oh, this isn't working. We got to take everything apart and then rebuild it." And then they just like stopped building it like 70% of the way. So it's like it did not function the way it was supposed to. So disappointing. Music's still epic. But that was like peak. Like I was like that 12-year-old ready for this game. Like music was intense. All the trailers were amazing. The graphics were like in HD for the first time. I remember that transition like to HD gaming. So I remember sitting there at Walmart looking at the kiosk, seeing like I think it was called Layer. It was like a 3D dragon. You'd use the PlayStation 3 controller to like promote its like gyro, and it was like this really like highly detailed dragon just like flying in the sky. And the game was like notorious, like people hated it, but it looked really cool. And I just remember like my mind being blown that games could look like that. I think I just totally digressed from the subject, but yeah, I played video games for my whole life.
What today at present time? What are you playing, or what systems are you playing?
I have a PS5. I rarely play that. Every once in a while when they drop few and far between. I've had a PlayStation pretty much consistently since the PS3 generation. At one point, I did have a PS2, but I didn't hold on to it for too long. But the PlayStation 5, there's just I love the exclusives that are on it. There's just not many. And any game that's not an exclusive, I get on my PC usually. Obviously, for video and content creation, I have gotten a pretty beefy PC, so I game on it all the time. And then my other thing is my Switch 2. I play that all the time for like content creation, and not just content creation, sometimes for fun too. But I do have my N64 still. Got a little PS1. Everything's off to my right. But yeah, I have actually got an analog 3D, and I'm enjoying experimenting with N64 games in that, and like seeing how good I can make them look, or if I can break them. It's great.
Now, your YouTube channel, what was the original motivation, or how did that start? How did you start creating content?
Oh, you'll love this. So I've always been sort of interested in content creation. Through high school and stuff, making silly videos, taking a video class, and then I went to school for it, obviously. But what really sparked me doing something, so originally I had a channel that I called the Studley Gamer, and I did a lot of Twitch streaming at that point. And my thing was I was playing horror games, and like I'm not that brave. So it'd be like me playing a horror game, I'd be like screaming, and like people liked it. And it actually I got rated by Dawko, if you know who that is. He's one of the big like Five Nights at Freddy's players on YouTube. Um he rated me on a Twitch stream. So like one of my first Twitch streams ever, they're like, "You've been rated by Dawko." And I'm like, "Who's Dawko?" Like I didn't know who it was at that point. And they're like, "You've been rated." And then it was like hundreds, if not like 1,000 people just popped in my like second or third live stream ever. And I'm like, I don't even know what a raid is. What am I doing with like what is happening right now? I'm just playing a game. And that sort of sparked like, hey, maybe I have something, because like all these people were like, "Oh, this guy's really funny." Like, you know what I mean? So I did that for a while. I did the playing horror games, and I got through like a bunch. I did a bunch of indie titles. I played a bunch of stuff. It was sort of a season. And I don't know what it was that drew me back. I know it was Banjo-Kazooie. But I was like, I don't want to play horror games necessarily anymore, because this isn't something I like always play. Like I'll play one occasionally. I was like, but I always go back and play Banjo. I'm like, what if I played Banjo? Like people might like that. No. People didn't really care. They were like, "Oh, this isn't really scary." I'm like, "Well, Grunty's scary. That scared me when I was a kid." And but what really sparked it was like maybe I want to do something new. I didn't want to stop content creation, and I kind of was like, I don't want to lose this audience. But if I have to restart, like it's going to be something totally new. And I knew I wanted to focus in on banjo. But what really got me like lined in with what I was going to do. So I was like, I'm going to do look back, like looking back at things. And then I was trying to pick something that represented the games to put on the front of that look back. And I went through a couple iterations. I was like looking at all the collectibles, like that's just where my brain went. And I was like, Banana Look Back, that's stupid. Power Star Look Back, that's dumb. Star Look Back, eh. Like I just kept going through that, and then I landed on Jiggy, and I was like, okay, that could work. That sounds kind of rolls off the tongue. And Jiggy Look Back actually started as a series, and I just called my YouTube that, because I was like, well, I'll just make that the name, like Jiggy Look Back. Like this is what I'm doing. I'm looking back at games, right? And the real catalyst for the first video, and why I did Donkey Kong 64, analyzing Donkey Kong 64, it was because of a channel called Press A, which is a very popular. They make a lot of Nintendo related content, I would say. And they had a video where they just talked about how much they hated Donkey Kong 64. Now, I know you didn't put up how much you hated Donkey Kong 64 as like this video essay. So I was like, I'm gonna play through this entire game and talk about why I love Donkey Kong 64 as like a counterweight to that, which sort of evolved over time and formulated into one of my most popular videos, which was defending Donkey Kong 64. And yeah, and then that branched out, and then you get me talking about Donkey Kong 64. It's just a natural segue into Banjo. And then once I got into Banjo, it was all over. And I'm like, okay, I think I figured it out. And it's sort of, I think, what did I describe my channel? Like exploring the lore. It's sort of like those childhood thoughts you had as a kid. Like when you're playing a game and you're like, why does that toilet have eyes? Why are there logos of different games here? Are they all connected? that's where my brain goes. I go back to like the late 90s as like little 5, 6 year old me, and I'm just like, what am I looking at? What am I thinking about? Like, what are these connections? What world is being built here and presented in front of me that I can kind of explore with that like childlike curiosity? That's probably a better way to describe my my channel. Although it's got some other things in there. It's got some like defending videos, like I mentioned, and yeah, that's sort of the origin, and it's evolved over time.
And I know you said earlier you do all your editing and producing
Mhm.
of your videos. What types of tools do you use when you do that? Is there any specific softwares you like to use over other ones?
Yeah, I pretty much use the Adobe Creative Suite, primarily Premiere Pro. Sometimes I get into After Effects with some special effects and things, and then Adobe Audition for audio occasionally. But a lot of it I find I can do in Premiere Pro these days. So it's pretty much Premiere. Oh, and Photoshop. Photoshop's a big one. A lot of the things I do, like I'm thinking specifically of like I did a Viva Pinata video. And the story of Viva Pinata, there's like a hawk moth was like I think that's what it's called. It was the inspiration for one of the Stamper brothers to conceptualize Viva Pinata. And so I had an image of a hawk moth where I like used Photoshop to cut out the wings, made a couple different variations of it flapping its wings, and then throw it into Premiere Pro and keyframe it and animate it so it looks like a little hawk moth is flying across the screen. That's the kind of stuff I do. And then maybe I'll add like some After Effects, like glow or lighting or something just to spice it up a little bit. But just silly things like that. And I sort of play off of still images and make my own. Like a lot of the animated things you see on my channel are things that I've gotten from still images and sort of just like morphed and created. Yeah, it kind of gives it a unique look, I think.
Speaking of unique too, I like every once in a while in your videos, you like to show glimpses of like I'm assuming it's like your room and some of the stuff you've collected. And I just want to say, like the stuff you've collected is just really extraordinary. Like all these different memorabilia items from video game history. How have you collected all these different things? I can even kind of see it in your background now, like the rare sign. And um,
Yeah.
how have you gotten hold of all these things?
There's a lot of different stories and different ways I've gotten things. Some things I've gotten because I just like, oh man, that's really cool, and I buy it when they drop some sort of merchandise. Fangamer.com is a great one that has a lot of cool banjo and rare related stuff. It's sort of like I see rare things and I buy rare things. So I've got a couple things actually I need to put up yet. I'm kind of running out of space and I have to rearrange how I do everything. And there's more stuff to the side here that's out of view for most people. That box in the background is filled with a bunch of stuff. Uh, but yeah, some of the things I have, like I have Donkey Kong plushies, and I had those. I have little Wario and Bowser as well, and I've had those since like 1999 or 2000, whenever that was, like late N64 lifetime, as I got obsessed and we just went out and bought it. And Donkey Kong was obviously like a big thing for me. So any Donkey Kong stuff, it was like, please, please buy this for me, mom and dad. And it happened. Um, some things like the rare logo is something I found from an Etsy page. They did 3D printing and I was like, can you make this? And they're like, yep. So they made it and it's pretty cool. Sort of similar story with the giant. I have a giant Jiggy piece behind me, and actually that lit up. That's no longer available, but it was super cool. And I just have this giant Jiggy. I cherish it forever. I got a little Rob the Robot. I found that from a seller on Facebook Marketplace. Like I'm hunting down these just random things. And then there's things like the U2's figures, which are sort of blurred out in the background here, but I've got like Mumbo, Banjo, like anything Banjo related. I just picked it up. I'm like, that sounds cool. And then Figgies. Figgies are actually the little like pixel art figures that have little backplates and they're magnetized. And that company actually sort of sponsors my channel. And they reached out to me. They it's the company First for Figures that did they do have the like really high quality gaming statues and things. So I've sort of partnered with them and I get a little discount code and hand that out. And anybody that orders with my code gets a discount and it gives me a little bit of a kickback. But every time they have new rare stuff like Banjo or Conquer, they send it to me and I don't complain about it. It's fantastic. And then there's a few random things thrown out here and there. Like I have a giant Donkey Kong 64 cartridge because I just had a friend that did 3D printing and he just made a bunch of cartridges and that was pretty cool. Um, yeah, and then banners that people have given me. Some I've acquired. There's a Conquer, Diddy Kong Racing, Banjo. There's a couple Banjo ones. Yeah, just all over the place. And any game console probably has a story tied to it too of how I got it. But I think the only one I've had since I was a kid was the GameCube. This is my GameCube, unfortunately, aside from my handhelds, I do have my handhelds. But my GameCube, unfortunately, is the only original console I had from when I was a kid. I needed money when I was in college and sold my N64 collection, which was probably the worst mistake anyone could make. I sold it for a couple $100. It probably was more realistically worth a couple $1,000 because it was pretty massive. I probably had like 80 titles for it. And I had like every game. I had like six controllers, bunch of controller packs. Like I had everything you could want, basically. And I threw it away, and it was really dumb. And since then, I got a new N64, and I've been slowly rebuilding that collection. But also with the addition of like EverDrives, I'm sort of like, it's not as important to me to get the physical cartridge unless it's a game I really hold near and dear to my heart. Like I have all the Banjo, I have all the rare games. I have all those. I have a pretty decent sized collection. It's probably like 30, 40 games, but it's like a fraction of what I used to have. It was a big thing for me. I regret selling it. Don't sell your games, kids or adults. Don't sell your kid games as an adult. There you go.
Yes. We've mentioned Rare now like quite a few times, and I was actually wondering if you can give like a brief overview of Rare, like who they are or what they are. Are they still around today? Kind of like a brief history of that company.
Sure, I'll do my best. So, Rare, I believe, started off as Ultimate Play the Game. It was a company by the basically the Stamper brothers, Chris and Tim Stamper. And sorry if I'm butchering names. I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I'm trying to remember all these little minute details. I've made videos on it. You can watch that too. Um, but the two Stamper brothers basically hacked the NES and reverse engineered it and started making games for it. And Nintendo was so impressed with the kind of games that they were making for the NES. They basically were like, these guys are making as good of games as we are for our hardware. Like they figured it out. They're making great. Their design philosophy is all the same. And so that sort of sparked like a partnership between Nintendo and Rare or Ultimate Play the Game at the time. And Ultimate Play the Game, they became Rare after a while. I'm not sure what the reason for the name change was. Maybe just brand recognition, or there was some sort of buyout. Something happened where they had to change the name, and they changed it to Rare, not Rareware, as some people may think. It's just Rare. Rareware is really like a mark on the game itself, saying like this is Rareware. Like Rareware is the name of what they're producing. If it's rare, if it's a rare game, it's Rareware. But the company itself is called Rare. And so Rare went on to they actually did make a few games like on Sega consoles and other consoles. But before they really locked in with Nintendo and made Donkey Kong Country, and like one of the big moves for that was they were experimenting with the Silicon Graphics machines back in the day, which were cutting edge, like 3D generated, like the same stuff that they used in Jurassic Park. Like they started creating these computer generated images in 3D. And at the time, gaming was still 2D, Super Nintendo 16-bit. but they found a way to basically export these models and then downsample them into the game and make it so it's basically a higher quality image that's been downsampled to 16-bit and thrown in the game, which gives it a totally unique look. And so these high quality 3D models for Donkey Kong became like synonymous with Rare. They looked good. Killer Instinct was the actually the original game they started like using this technology on, and that's what impressed Nintendo to prompt them to push for a new Donkey Kong game. They wanted to reimagine Donkey Kong. And so they did. And then that partnership became like really, really tight, really tight. And Rare became essentially I guess you'd call it a second party developer for Nintendo, where they're basically, it's a Nintendo game. They published everything Rare did for a while. And the N64 era was the golden age of Rare. That's where all the best games came from that you know, Banjo-Kazooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Diddy Kong Racing. All of those games came from that era and that partnership as a result of Donkey Kong Country. It sort of was a transitional period in the early 2000s where Rare wanted more staff. They wanted to make more games, new games, be creative, kind of explore options. And they went to Nintendo to basically they're like, "Hey, we'd love you to fund this and buy us out and like we want to expand, we want to do more." And Nintendo said no. And there's a lot of speculation on why Nintendo did not purchase Rare. The truth of the matter is probably a lot of different little things across the board. The main reason, if you ask me, is probably due to them always being late with their products. A lot of their games they would develop and they would never make deadlines. So they'd be super good games. Like, don't get me wrong, they're like some of the best games ever, but they wouldn't come out when Nintendo really asked them to. One of the big sort of results of that was like Dinosaur Planet becoming sort of Nintendo coming in and Shigeru Miyamoto sort of being like, this should be Star Fox. And like, okay, they pushed for it to be Star Fox. They wanted it to be like the GameCube's big launch title. They did not make that window. It did sort of release early on in the GameCube life, but that was like the straw that broke the camel's back, I think. That game in particular, where Nintendo's like, no, we're not buying you. And so they sort of hunted around for a couple different options, and I think Activision was on the cards, Microsoft, obviously. There was sort of a bidding war going on before ultimately Rare decided to go with Microsoft's offer, and Microsoft bought them out, and they developed really two games for the original Xbox. Tons of games that were originally supposed to be N64 games transitioned to GameCube and then transitioned to Xbox. And a lot of them saw release on the 360 era, like Cameo was one of those that made the transition. Perfect Dark Zero was one of those. Um, and then they were popping off games left and right for a little while on the 360 era. And then the Kinect came out, no prompting from Microsoft. It was just purely like Rare was interested in the Kinect technology. I know that people really, really look at Kinect and they're like, oh, that's when Rare, like, they were forced to make games that they shouldn't have had to. And Rare, they wanted to experiment with that. They thought it was cool, which is sort of a rare thing. They are sort of like Nintendo in that way, where they like to experiment and try new things constantly. That philosophy has never really changed until the release of Sea of Thieves. And now we're sort of stuck in limbo. Sea of Thieves has been their main bread and butter for 7 years, 8 years. I mean, we're getting close to like a decade. We're over 5 years of Sea of Thieves being the only title that they released. They had one game that looked very interesting that allegedly was supposedly like Pal World, Pokemon type of a exploration, survival, catch monsters sort of a game. And it was called Everwild. But unfortunately, if anybody follows recent Microsoft Xbox developments, Microsoft basically shut down a bunch of Xbox studios. They went in and shut down. There was a Perfect Dark reboot. It wasn't being made by Rare, but they had support, and they shut that studio down. Microsoft canceled Everwild, and that kind of forced out basically the last two remaining original Rare like 90s like team members. Um, Goodness gracious, I'm trying to think. Greg Males, and then I can't think of her name, but she was a big stay in like Conquer. She was the voice of Barry. Um, but yeah, that was sort of the last thing. I think Robin Beanland might be the only name that's recognizable still at Rare today. Otherwise, it's all new faces, which is fine. It's fine to have new people in, but we really haven't seen any new games. And the only hope we had for a new Rare game is sort of in the wind right now. We don't know where it's at. But the good news is the company is still going. The company's still a thing. I believe that the current director is very interested in exploring possibly old IPs. He's mentioned that banjo is something he wants to look at, whatever that means. So that's where we're at, off the top of my head.
I thought I saw you had the chance to speak to somebody from Rare. Is that correct? Like one of the developers?
Yes, I did. Let me. It's I always want to say Cawood. I think it's Michael K. Wood. I have to look at how I pronounce it. I had to like specifically look up interviews beforehand to talk to or to like hear how to pronounce his last name. But yes, Mike is a great guy. He worked on Star Fox Adventures before, even before when it was Dinosaur Planet. He worked on that. He did a lot of the like cutscene animations. So he was on the animation side of Rare. So he went in, he did that. He worked on Cameo was his big project. He was lead animator on that. And I'm trying to think of what else he did. He sort of touched a few other things, like he worked on a scrapped banjo game that sort of morphed into Nuts and Bolts. There's a lot of vehicle mechanics in that. I think it was like Banjo Kart almost. But yeah, and he just developed his own VR game. It's called the Phoenix Gene, and it's actually a really fun. It's sort of a rail shooter, and you sort of hold there's like a phoenix. You hold it like a paper airplane, sort of a thing, and you move it around. You catch collectibles. You throw it out, all sorts of stuff. And Grant Kirkhope actually worked with him on the soundtrack on that too. So they're still like they're all connected. There's a couple other people from Rare that were also involved in the project, so they're all kind of buddying up. They're like, hey, let's do something fun, which is cool. That's also cool.
Growing up, I played banjo. I played the banjo games. I played a lot of Rare games. 007. I played Perfect Dark. I played, but I never knew this term collectathon. I think until I watched your channel, which is I kind of sounds pretty
Oh,
crazy. I just never really thought of the games as like that was a genre of games. But it seems like we talked Banjo Kazooie, Tui, DK64, these really great games that were collectathons. How would you describe that genre of game?
okay. So 3D platformer is sort of the general term that they give to games that are like move around a character in a 3D space, jumping. That's essentially all you need. That could be a 3D platformer. Bubsy 3D could be a 3D platformer. Spyro the Dragon's a 3D platformer. The term collectathon really, I think it relates just to the sheer amount of stuff you need to grab in a game. It's the primary focus. Mario 64, I would probably describe as a collectathon as well because it's got 120 stars to collect. You have to find a certain item. You have to collect a bunch. It's not the only item though. There's usually other items that you also collect, like coins. So collectathon usually applies to more than one item. So if there's an objective, that's a little different. But you could have a 3D platformer and it not be a collectathon. Like Sonic Adventure is the game that's coming off the top of my head. You have rings that you can get, but it's not really a collectathon. I would describe that as a 3D platformer leaning toward an action adventure game. There's sort of like all these subgenres of games. You can kind of mishmash them, but collectathon is that's the best one. That's the best genre. It's just a lot of fun. But yeah, Banjo, Conquer, see Diddy Kong Racing I was about to say, but it's not. It's sort of a collectathon, but that's also a racer. It's not a 3D platformer collectathon. So it'd be like a racing collectathon. So collectathon almost has an additional context plus 3D platformer, if that makes sense. If you're following my train of thought.
Oh no, no, I definitely am, and it seems like this time period of when the N64 initially came out, and these earlier, I don't, well, not earlier, but like late 90s Rare games, um, they were producing some like just classics, some classic collectathons. I know Super Mario 64 as well, that's separate, but is there anything special about like that particular time period when this console came out that you had just some great collectathons? And maybe, I know like today you still do, like I really like Super Mario Odyssey. I know that came out
Hmm.
a few years ago, but it seemed like that time period was a really special time for this genre. I don't know if you think there was anything particular about that time period that made it that way, or
Yes, there is. I'd probably say one of the things is experimentation, where they really were sort of figuring out early 3D mechanics. And so that created sort of variation between all these different 3D collectathons, because Mario does not feel like Banjo, even though conceptually wise they're fairly similar. They don't feel the same. They feel totally different. Mario feels a little more athletic, like he's flipping around, he's moving really quickly. Banjo feels more precise and intentional about your movement, right? But there's also like a catch 22 to that, because I think the success of Mario 64 and then the success of Banjo, those two 3D platformers really shot the genre like up. And so you have a bunch of other people trying to do their own spin on a 3D platformer collectathon at that point. Everyone experimenting, everyone trying to mimic the basic formula, but then putting their own twist on it. So you get games like Rayman 2, which are phenomenal. You get games, unfortunately, like Earthworm Jim 3D, which should have been a banger, but it just wasn't. But your mileage may vary with the different kinds that are sort of in that 3D platforming collectathon genre. But what made it special was the fact that they were experimenting, they were trying. So for every gem, there's probably 10 bad ones. Maybe not that many, but you know, but the gems that were gems were real gems. Like they are games that you can pick up and play today and they're still fantastic. And that's not even just limited to the 3D collectathon. I think it also expands into like Zelda Ocarina of Time. That Zelda games really didn't change that much until Breath of the Wild sort of restructured the formula. Otherwise, it was pretty much what the N64 established. And I think that's sort of a trend with gaming. It's like they find something that works and then they do it for a long time. That's why I'm no longer interested in Call of Duty games. They're all the same. I'm sorry. If Call of Duty's your thing, great. It's not mine anymore. I loved it back in the day. Now it just feels like rinse and repeat. You got to do something special. But it's sort of like that era, that 90s, mid 90s, they're experimenting. They're going all over the place. They're doing different things, throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks. And I think that's what makes it special. I think that's what makes it a special era. If you look at the early 2000s, even, we're sort of pushing into that territory where they kind of know what works. And so you get a lot of games that maybe functionally are good, but they feel sort of bland. They don't have that sort of special twist. And that's something that I appreciated about Rare too, was that their games always felt unlike everybody else's. They were just over the top silly, over the top cartoony. Hey, let's put googly eyes on this because we think it's funny. They're just having fun. You can feel that they were having fun making these games as much as you're having fun playing these games. And there's a couple titles that weren't on the 64 that were really good, and they are like 3D platform, like Spyro the Dragon comes to mind. That's an absolute classic, and it's also silly. It's also 3D. It feels so different than Mario. Like it's a totally different game, but conceptually, it's still a 3D platformer collectathon. And yeah, I just think experimentation and trying different things and avenues and seeing what sticks when you throw it at the wall. That's what made that era really special. And that's kind of just true for the 90s. Like it's not even just like platformers. Like it's just true for the that whole decade. They were just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. See-through Pepsi? Sure. I don't know. 3D Doritos? Why not? Like, let's see what happens. We've lost that.
you mentioned for every like one gem, you could have like 10 not so great games. And like what for this genre, or maybe even just for a video game as a whole, what does, in your mind, what separates like a good game from a game that you just get bored of and you don't want to play anymore?
I think there's a few elements. Probably the biggest one is your moveset, your gameplay, how fast you can move. I see so many games that make the mistake of slowing you down. You use a move, or all of a sudden the action breaks up and you're doing this puzzle that's really slow paced, or heaven forbid, you're running through a forest and then all of a sudden you have to jump to a platform and you have to stand there and wait for another platform to ride over. You jump on that platform and then you have to wait for it to go back over, and then you go on another platform that raises up slowly. Like anything that breaks up the action like that tends to hinder an experience. It's just so slow, it's so clunky. Now, if you had 20 platforms in a line and they fall as you quickly jump on them, that prompts you to want to, like, it still gives you a challenge. Same effect. Way more fun and engaging than having a platform just like slowly move towards you. I'm not totally against platforms in that way, but there are some games that do that. Like Tonic Trouble does that from the N64 era of things, and it really slows down the gameplay. I think that's a huge thing, and I think that's why a game like Mario Odyssey or Donkey Kong Bonanza were so successful. It's high action all the time. You're constantly moving. You're never sitting still. You're never like, oh, I need to wait for this. There might be something like a hazard or something like lightning comes, and so you have to strategically like dive under something for a second, and then you can go back out. But those are like high action hazards. They're not slow you down hazards. And I think that's a big thing. And then the other thing that I think is equally as important is level design. And I'm also going to like tag onto that atmosphere, because there's a lot of bland stuff that I've seen where you play it, and if you're not engaging with the way the world looks, it sort of puts a you're just not as interested. You're not as interested to keep continuing. What's the draw? The gameplay's fun. That's great. That's one aspect. A good example of a game maybe not having it has great gameplay, but it doesn't necessarily have the draw of like the worlds and stuff. And I'm not calling anybody out. I'm not saying it's a bad game by any means. But like Super Kiwi, if you've ever heard of this, it's like an indie title released on Steam. It's really fun, but it doesn't have it's a short game. It doesn't have a massive world that you can go in and explore, and it doesn't really drive you to explore it too much, just a little bit. And part of that is it's a short indie game. Like it's not a big AAA title. It does great for what it's doing. It's a very fun game, and I highly recommend people go try it. It's like $1. It's like something super cheap. It's just a lot of fun. But it's an example of the gameplay carrying pretty much the game in its entirety. The level design's okay, but there's nothing memorable like Freeze Easy Peak from Banjo, or you know what I mean, or Jungle Japes from Donkey Kong. That's one thing I talked about. I was in a few discussions about Donkey Kong Bonanza versus Donkey Kong 64. Like people like as if we can compare those two because they're pretty different. But one of the things that I brought up, they're like, "Oh yeah, level design. The level design's so good in Bonanza," and I'm like, "Is it though?" And they're like, "Well, what's the problem?" I'm like, "I'll tell you the problem. If I tell you Jungle Japes, if I tell you Angry Aztec or something, and you're familiar with Donkey Kong, you're gonna know, oh yeah, I can picture these levels, right? I can picture them in my head. I know what they look like, the atmosphere, maybe the music, like lots of cool stuff. And then if I tell you to picture sublevel 701, do you know what that is? Probably not. Um, yeah, it's sort of a quantity over quality situation with Bonanza, I think. And thankfully, you're moving so fast that those are few and far between. But there's a lot of levels in there you're not going to remember. You might remember some of the aesthetics, like elephants, purple world, storm, like stuff like that. But you're not going to remember the specific level unless you play this game like 5 billion times. But I think Mario Odyssey does a little bit better in that aspect of like exploring worlds and being a bit more memorable. I don't know. Those are like the two big things, I think. Atmosphere, level design, and your speed, your gameplay speed.
How would you describe Banjo? Like, what is that video game series about in your mind?
It's about an anthropomorphic bear with a bird that lives in his backpack who go on adventures, usually trying to thwart the evil plans of a witch. That's
Nice.
probably the best way to describe it.
Is there any hope in your mind that I know you alluded to this earlier with the current leadership at Rare and bringing back some of these IPs, but any hope that they do make another succession of the Banjo title?
Yes, I think there's always hope. I think at this point we shouldn't even be considering a new Banjo title. I think at this point we need to be considering Rare just making anything. Um, Now, if Rare gave out the rights to a company like Toys for Bob, which is sort of like a rumored thing that's always been in the background, if they gave out the rights to Toys for Bob to use Banjo, we definitely could see remakes in the vein of like Crash and Spyro, how those got remade. I think that's a great first step. But I also think that Rare and Microsoft really fumbled the ball because there was a sweet point for resurrecting Banjo, and that was when Banjo was featured in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. That time frame, even if it was a year, 2 years, 3 years out, it sort of showed the world this character, introduced Banjo to a new generation that would grow up playing Smash Bros. Ultimate. Like that was the time to really capitalize on Banjo. And now we're sort of past that window and we have nothing to show for it, which is just horribly disappointing. Do I think it's impossible that they make something? No, absolutely not. Like everyone's like, "Oh yeah, when pigs fly, like we'll get a Banjo 3." I'm like, "No. I think it's more likely than that. I think it's just a matter of having the right leadership and Microsoft getting their crap together as a company. I think that's also a big factor. Microsoft is sort of they're transitioning, man. I don't think we're going to see necessarily an Xbox in the future. We might see another Xbox console, but it almost feels like it would be a branded, like a PC sort of a thing, where they're like, "Oh yeah, this PC is Xbox certified" or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's different, or like a Google Stick or something, where they're like, "Yeah, it's certified to play Xbox games." Like they're gonna transition and change, I think, from the hardware manufacturing side of things. It feels like they've already moved toward third party and they're like software more than hardware, and they're really trying to push that. And I feel like that is to the detriment of having exclusives, which Sony is sort of moving that way too. Less as a service and more like just making their games available on anything and everything they can. Like I think it's more likely we'll see more PlayStations. I think it's less likely we'll see more Xboxes. Um, but with that being said, if Xbox turns into like a straight up third party, sort of what Sega did back in the day, we might see more Banjo. We might have more opportunity for them to partner with Nintendo and throw up. It feels right that they'd partner with Nintendo just because of the history, but also, I don't know, it just feels right, doesn't
Mhm.
it?
For how much you really enjoyed playing like Kazooie and Tooie, and several years go by until Nuts and Bolts comes out, and I was wondering when Nuts and Bolts came out, do you remember your reaction at the time of like first playing it, like when it first released, and uh, how do you compare it to Kazooie and Tooie?
I'll tell you my reaction when it came out. I was horribly, horribly disappointed and angry. Not because of what the game looked like or what it played, but because at the time I only had a PS3, I didn't have a 360, and I couldn't get the new Banjo game. I was so mad. I was infuriated. I was like, this is the worst thing. This is the worst mistake I've ever made in my life. Um, but when I went and actually finally got to play Nuts and Bolts, which was much later, by the way, I maybe tried it at a friend's house, but I never got to sit down and play it until like maybe the like late mid 2010s. Like it was a while later. Um, there's a few things. One, I don't think the game is bad. So I'm just gonna like nix anybody saying that. Like the game is not bad. Two, it's not a Banjo, it's not like Banjo-Kazooie. It's a spin-off. You can't treat it as a main entry. They're sort of trying to treat it like a main entry. No, it's not a main entry. It's not the same. It's a main entry like Donkey Konga is a main entry to Donkey Kong Country, right? It's a spin-off. It's totally different gameplay, has the same characters. I sort of stand firm that if it was a Mumbo spin-off and it was like Mumbo focused, we even give Banjo a freaking wand. Why do we give them a wand? You have Mumbo, he has a wand. Like just let him do it. But whatever. The look-wise weird decisions. I've watched so many rare replay videos of them like talking about the design of nuts and bolts and them saying they didn't like how Banjo looked when he was brought into the high poly. It didn't stand out. And I'm just like, you guys are crazy. Like, I think making everything square was a mistake. I think adding unnecessary stitching and detail everywhere. There's a saying called it's reduce and simplify. And then there's the opposite, and it's sort of like Marvel did this a couple times with like superhero suits, where you sort of over design them and you add a bunch of unnecessary lines and stitching and like effects and stuff. Not necessary, and it sort of muddies the water and makes things ugly. Like just go back. All we wanted was an HD version of Banjo. Like, and the thing that I think really ticked people off is the fact that the game pokes fun at the fact it knows you don't like the way it looks. So they were conscious that they knew people weren't going to like the way this game looks. So then my question is, why are you making this game? Who is this game for? Is it for you guys just so you can make a new Banjo game that's totally different because you were bored with the concept? If so, fine. But if you're making this for the fans, why are you making fun of the fans? Which it kind of is. And that puts a bad taste in my mouth. So for that reason, I can understand why people hate it. And you can get a little justification for that. But I don't think it's inherently a bad game. I think it's actually the gameplay is pretty fun. It sort of plays off your Lego building fantasies. You know, you ever got that Lego box and has a buttload of instructions, and if you're like me, you look at that and you say, well, that's not happening, and it goes into a big bin, and then you have a bunch of new Lego pieces, right? Well, in nuts and bolts, you can finally make that big. It's a lot easier.
I was surprised too from again watching your channel, watching your videos on Kazooie and Tui, that there's even like a little, seems like a little divide on what people think between those games. And I was wondering if you can explain like what kind of which one's your favorite and kind of the little differences between those two.
Yeah, so the difference between Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, Banjo-Tooie has sort of a Metroidvania element to it, where you can explore the world and do things in different orders. And man, I love it. I love the giant worlds. I love exploring things. I love like that is one of my main draws for the Banjo series is the world building, all the characters, looking at things, like going into a cave and it opens up this new area with some secret item or something in it. Like that to me is super fun. I think I'm gonna shout out Mark Kirko, who does ROM hacks for Banjo-Kazooie. He understands that. I think he must love that too, that element of it. He puts a bunch of secret rooms that you can find with a bunch of Easter eggs in it. That's the best. That's what I love. Banjo-Tooie is filled to the brim with that. Banjo-Tooie is my favorite of the two. The reason why people tend to prefer Kazooie, which I understand, it's a tighter, quicker experience. It sort of caters to those people who go in, want to complete a level, move to next level, complete level, and just beat a game in like one sitting. Banjo-Tooie's not like that. Banjo-Tooie's like go in, there's a ton to collect. It's all scattered. You got to do several different tasks to make something happen. It's very much more of the adventure side of things. It is a collectathon, but it's a little more of an adventure than Kazooie is, where Kazooie is more like Mario style. Get into a level, get out. Does that answer your question? But
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely prefer Tui. Yeah, there's a divide there. I think most, probably 70% of people would prefer Kazooie, but in my mind, Tui is just better in just about every way. Gameplay, I mean, it's the first game I think I've ever played where you have all the moves you had in the first game right off the bat, and then they just give you more on top of that. Think about how many sequels you've ever played where you have the same move set with all the upgrades and everything, and then you just get more. It's usually they either completely redo the formula or you sort of come in like Metroid and you have to re-get everything, and then maybe there's like one or two extra things in there. But Banjo-Tooie, man, what a game! What a game!
Is the divide, or is there more? Yeah, I guess divide's the right word. Is there a bigger divide between like people who are a fan of Kazooie and Tui, or is the divide bigger amongst people who think like DK64 is good or bad, or it's like too long and such, or is it kind of similar between those two scenarios?
You know what's funny? I think people dislike DK64 for similar reasons to Banjo-Tooie. And usually the people that love DK64 love Banjo-Tooie. And I've told people that love that love DK64, I'm like, if you've never played Tooie, go play Tooie. If you love this game, you will love that game. And it's always right. They always do. Um, I think DK64 is similar in exploring the world a little bit. It's a little more structured as in like a big hub world. Well, I guess it is sort of like 2E, because 2E does have a giant hub world, but it's like the levels are connected within the hub world versus like Portal to somewhere else, right? But yeah, there's a lot to collect in DK64, and I actually think if Banjo-Tooie had more to collect in DK60 or had more to collect than it does, like DK64, those worlds would have less complaints because a lot of people say the worlds feel empty, like they're too big. I could see that. They sort of bundled notes together so you don't have to collect notes where notes used to like trail and sort of lead you down pathways. And now it's like there's like five notes where there would have been like 50.
Last question, wrapping up, Jordan. As far as like your channel and your content creation career, do you have any like big plans for like new videos or like new things you're going to do within your YouTube channel?
Yeah, I just dropped a new series called Every Species where I'm going through games and I'm gonna like look at every single inkling of a character and be like, okay, what is this species? Like, what's this character all about? I just dropped that with Banjo-Kazooie. It's sort of the first ones from sort of like getting my sea legs with it, trying to figure out how I'm gonna frame it. I'm sort of a like, I have this idea for a series, I'm just gonna do one. And then by the time I get to like number five, it's gonna be exactly how I wanted it to be. Um, that's probably the biggest thing that I started doing. As far as like other new content, I've been doing live streams every Friday and doing some new stuff. I've been sort of wrestling with the idea of doing more on-camera stuff. Typically my normal content is like voiceover and I'm showing gameplay footage, I'm showing animations, I'm doing different things. But I think there's something to be said about having that sort of like personal connection of showing your face sometimes. Maybe not all the time, but sometimes. I mean, hopefully people don't get sick of looking at me, I guess. I know I do, but that's just me. But yeah, I think there's some room to grow in that way, and I definitely want to just make more content. I'm never short on ideas, but I'm always short on time. That's sort of my problem. If I could do this full time, I would, and I'd probably have a new video like every single day. Maybe every other day. I'm not going to give myself every single day because that's a lot of work. Sometimes games or sometimes video ideas just like happen and manifest, and I crank something out in like 6 hours, and I'm like, wow, that was really fast, and that's fast. Um, Usually, I have to sit there and just wrangle up a script in my brain, collect my thoughts, And then it could take me anywhere from like 10 to 15 hours to formulate that into a video and edit it out and maybe export it. And that's still relatively quick. I think it even takes longer than that sometimes. Depends on the length of video. Some videos just like that. Funny enough, defending DK64, probably one of my biggest videos. Maybe it is my biggest video. Took me maybe 10 hours tops. Write it. Like I did it in a Saturday. I just did it in one day and it was out and then it just kind of blew up and I was like, this is great. Now I need to do that over and over and over. But the ideas, they're there. But it's like, oh man, how do I get this to happen? I need just more Saturdays.
What advice do you have for content creators, or has anybody ever asked you for advice on their own YouTube channel?
Plenty, plenty of people have asked me for advice. I've actually helped a lot of people grow, which is super cool. There's a few practical things I could give as tips for YouTube specifically. So I'll just give a couple of those. One is don't do basic Let's Plays where you're talking while you're playing the game and you're doing it in like parts, so you're labeling it like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. Because when you get to part 65, people just have lost interest like 63 parts ago. And then if someone new comes in and clicks on it, they'll be like, "Oh, well, I want to go back to the original." And then it takes them out of that video and they have to go find the old one. And maybe they'll get through it, maybe they won't. I don't know. It's not as engaging. Make one video, do the whole thing, one sitting, even if it takes you longer to just beat the game. Don't rush your content. There's been times where I feel like I need to meet a deadline and like throw something out there. I'm like, the only deadline that exists is the one that is self-imposed by yourself. So just let that go. If it takes 2 weeks to make a video, it takes 2 weeks to make a video. The views will come if the content is good enough. And then another thing is always improve. Always be improving. Always look at something. Look at someone else's video that does well and be like, why did theirs do well and mine didn't? Especially if it's like a basic series. I'm sort of like at a point too where I watch videos and sometimes I'm like, mine's better than that. Why didn't mine get as many views? And that's not to say like a egotistical thing. I'm just saying like production value. I usually do put a lot of production value in mine. So there's something to be said about sometimes weighing the production value versus the not ready or availability of the content, but the timing of the content. Like if something comes out, a good example is the Banjo-Kazooie just got recompiled on PC. So now it's got a native PC port and you can play it in ultra wide and all sorts of cool stuff. Um, that was a timely thing. I made a video about it. I don't know what it is, 15,000 views or something like that. I just threw it out there. I did that within an hour of the recomp releasing. And people were like, "How did you get this out so fast?" I'm like, "Because I sacrificed quality to just give you the information and throw that out into the world." And it's still, me. It's still me. It's like you see it, you'll know. But yeah, I just didn't add a bunch of animations and stuff that I would normally do. And I didn't make it 20 minutes. I made it 2 minutes, succinct, just quick, throw it out there. Like sometimes you got to gauge content like that. Is this worth a 20-minute video? Is this a 5-minute video? Don't stretch a 5-minute video to a 20-minute video. If it's short, make it short. And if you can make it a short, you can make it a short. I don't know. Those are some tips, I guess. And then just like study thumbnails too. Don't do the typical like everyone puts like a react face like and then shows the game like and also don't try to do the thing where you plaster your face or your friends' faces on the characters of the game. The reason why that doesn't work, it's funny, okay? It's funny to you because it's your friends, it's your group, it doesn't work otherwise because people don't know you. People don't know your face. It's like there's a practical reason. It's not that it's bad, it's that it's not funny to other people. Sometimes you gotta realize that. So I try to, if you look at my thumbnails, rarely do I have my face on them. Rarely. Sometimes. It depends. If it's a reaction video, that makes sense. But usually it's game title, some image from the game, and then maybe if it's like a series, it's the word of the series underneath. It's pretty standard, but it works. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's good stuff. Thank you so much, Jordan, for this conversation and joining me today. This has been really great getting to know you and talking about these games. I love a lot of Rares games too, and I've enjoyed watching your channel.
Yeah, you
So
do.
yeah. And I'm sorry, one last thing for people to connect with you besides the YouTube channel. I know you're on Twitter too. I followed you on
Hmm.
Twitter. Any other avenues, any other social media?
I am on TikTok. I post on TikTok and Instagram. I am on Facebook too, though I don't post on there as frequently.
Nice.
I'm trying to be better at posting on other things. I really push the YouTube. The YouTube, I sort of, what is that saying? It's like never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing from Ron Swanson. I'm quoting. Sorry, I don't normally swear. That's the thing. I'm usually family friendly, but just throwing that out there. But that saying is true. I just kind of went all my eggs into the YouTube basket, and now I'm like, okay, well, I should probably at least try to grow my Instagram and try to. TikTok's another thing. TikTok's another thing. They made me mad. I could tell you the story, but they made me mad. TikTok support sucks. Boo.
Oh no.
Thumbs down.
Well, your the links to your other like your YouTube channel, definitely I'll include that in the description of the episode. And thanks again for everybody out there. Thank you for listening. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care, everybody.